Hey guys, this video is all about the fun we had watching Saturday morning cartoons as kids. And I've got some DVDs here to represent several of the cartoons we used to watch, as well as some comic books and toys that tie in with those. So let's dive right in. Here's the Addams Family, put out by Hanna-Barbera. And let's see, I believe that came out in the mid-70s. And it's in the style of the original Charles Addams uh, cartoons that he did, like for the New Yorker and different publications. And it's a pretty good cartoon. The one drawback with this really is that they travel around in like a vehicle that looks like a haunted house. It's a different take on it, but it's not quite as good as it could be because of that. Just my opinion. All right, now we've got a real classic. The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. And that's a complete series. There's a lot of DVDs in this big box set here. And it's got some good bonus features too. These backup features are really great, You had, of course, you had Rocky and Bullwinkle, and they got into some crazy adventures, and some of that stuff was really funny. And a lot of it was double entendre, and there were hidden meanings there for the adults, so they got a kick out of it too. Dudley Do-Right, Aesop and Son, Fractured Fairy Tales, Peabody's Improbable History, and more. So, really good stuff there. Bonus features, it's got some commercials. And June Foray interview. She did the voice of Rocky, I think, and various other things there. Really great box set. And when I bought this a couple of years ago, it was really cheap. You might be able to still get this pretty cheap. Just check Amazon and YouTube, and eBay, and different vendors and see what you can come up with. But I think I got that whole set for around 40 bucks. Well worth it. Here is Adam Ant. Now, this came out in the 60s. I remember watching this when I was pretty small. And Hanna-Barbera did a lot of funny animal cartoons back in those days. And, I enjoy them all, You've got Huckleberry Hound, and a lot of the other characters that Hanna-Barbera trotted out, of course, Yogi Bear and all those. And trying to get this thing to focus for you. But this is my favorite. I think this came out in like 66, I want to say, first. And then, of course, they reran them for years later on just about all of these good cartoons. But this had a couple of backups in it. The Hillbilly Bears was one of them. There they are. Those characters are absolutely hilarious, especially the Paul, the one on the right there. That dude just mumbled all the time, but they could always understand him, and they would answer back and interpret what he said for the audience. But it's just hilarious. And also, the Adam Ant stories were pretty good, but the real attraction here for me was the Hillbilly Bears, and also you had Granny and Precious Pup, and he was a wheezer and a mumbler. That Precious Pup was. Hang on just a second. Let me get this. Boy, I tell you what, this camera can't buy a focus. There we go. So anyway, this Precious Pup, he was a wheezer and a mumbler. He was like Muttley before there was a Muttley. So if you get a chance, get those and watch them. You'll laugh your butt off at that stuff. And here is Birdman and the Galaxy Trio. This is one of the Hanna-Barbera superhero characters. And these hold a fond place in many people's hearts. And of course, a lot of this, was made fun of years later on Cartoon Network. And some of it was funny, and I don't know, some of it not so much. I kind of like the original stuff myself, being an old cartoon geezer, I guess. But the Galaxy Trio, not as great as some, but the Birdman stories were pretty good, and they always had these stark soliloquies that they would yell out when they do something. Like when Birdman was flying out of his headquarters with his Eagle Avenger, his headquarters is like in a mountain. It's hollow, kind of like a volcano, but it was his headquarters. He'd always yell, "Birdman!" And when you think about it now, it sounds pretty corny, but back then, to an 8-year-old, it was pretty good stuff. It's still fun if you approach it with the right frame of mind. Now here is Dastardly and Muttley in their flying machines, and they're always after this pigeon. This came after the Wacky Races. This is like a spin-off from the Wacky Races. And it's pretty good. I mean, anything with Muttley in it is funny. And Dick Dastardly, he was like the consummate villain bumbler that always got his comeuppance constantly when he would try to take shortcuts and cheat people and, just generally be a big-time villain. And, that's pretty good. It's not as good as the original Wacky Races, but it's pretty good. Now, this is one I didn't see when it first came out, the Drac Pack. But I picked it up because it's monster-oriented. I haven't watched all of them yet. But this is supposed to be the complete series. And I saw a couple of them, and it looks interesting. This is one of the later cartoons. Check that out in depth later on. Now here's a classic. Hanna-Barbera's Fantastic Four. And I believe this debuted in 1967. The guy's got 66 on it. Now they do not offer a factory DVD version of this, so you go bootleg when you gotta. And this has all of the episodes on it. It's a complete collection, but it only has the opening once at the very beginning of each disc. It has the opening. Then it just goes into the episodes like as chapters. And I'd like it a lot better if they had the opening on every one of them. I mean, it wouldn't have killed them to do that. But I'm glad I got it. Here is Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles. Now this came out in '66, I believe. And I was a little dismayed by this when I was a kid because I was watching Space Ghost at the same time, and Space Ghost, they played it straight on Space Ghost, but Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles had a bit more of a comedic edge. It was pretty campy. But as I watch them now, I realize that it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy them now a lot more than I did when I was a kid, really, because it just depends on your attitude, when you watch this stuff and what memories they bring back, obviously, as to how much you get out of them. And I'm trying my best to get that to focus. It's trying. Anyway, it's a good cartoon and it's worth watching. Hey, I still watch all this stuff on Saturday morning. I take turns with them and rotate them in and out, and I'm still just a big kid, really, when it comes to this. Here's Galtar and the Golden Lance. I think this came out in '87. This is Hanna-Barbera's take on the fantasy sword and sorcery genre. It's kind of like the Lord of the Rings or Conan Hanna-Barbera style. And of course, it's a cartoon for kids, so they had to soften some of the stuff, like the gore, and the edged weapons chopping people up like Conan was fond of doing. So they had these weapons shoot out bolts of energy that just knocked the opponents out as an alternative to the blood and gore that would come from chopping them up. Still a good cartoon, had a good storyline, good supporting characters. This is a live action show, The Ghostbusters. This was early 70s. This starred Larry Storch and Forrest Tucker from F Troop and Bob Burns as Tracy the gorilla. Now, this was a funny show. You know, I still watch these too. And, you know, it was real low budget, and they did it tongue in cheek, but it's good. You know, I mean, it's got some good actors, and it's corny as all get out, but it's for kids, and I'm glad I got these, that I can revisit that when I want to. Here's a great one, Groovy Ghoulies. I think 1970 on this one. Uh, Now they had some great music, you know, great pop music on this, and it was all, you know, of course, with a monster slant, you know, and they had several different bands, you know, that were takeoffs on real bands like the Mummies and the Puppies, and let's see, can't remember some of the others right off, but anyway, this DVD features some pretty good special features there. And, you know, it's got some interviews with some famous people, Alice Cooper, Forrest J. Ackerman, Ron Chaney, about what they remember, you know, about the Groovy Ghoulies. And you can watch most of these. These especially, I know, were on YouTube back, you know, a few months ago. I guess they still are. Problem is, when you watch this stuff on YouTube, it's these big monetized channels that drive you nuts with the commercials, man. I mean, you're just assaulted by the commercials. And it's better to get the DVDs if you can. Now, here's the Herculoids. This is one of my favorites. Everything is monsters with the Herculoids. You know, they have these monstrous animals that it's all like one big family. They're not really pets. They're like part of the family. And there's Xandor and Tara, his wife, and his son Dorno. And, you know, these great huge beasts like Zoc, the laser ray dragon, Tundro, Igu, the rock ape, Gloop and Gleep, the formless, fearless wonders. And this is just great stuff, man. I mean, they live on this jungle planet, and they're always getting attacked and invaded by these aliens and other evil creatures, and the Herculoids have to turn them back. You know, it's like a fight for survival. It's like a kid's dream, you know, for a cartoon. Monsters everywhere. Now here is the 1982 Incredible Hulk series. I haven't seen all these. They're pretty good, though. They're pretty good. For a later cartoon, they're not bad. Johnny Quest. This started out in prime time, I think in 1964. I remember watching it in prime time. I loved it, man. And then it moved to Saturday morning, and it is the only cartoon that played on all three major networks on Saturday mornings throughout the 60s. This was rerun over and over because it's so good. You know, this is all 26 episodes. And the animation is a cut above any of the other animation because they were going for a realistic feel to it. And the guy behind the driving creative force behind this is Doug Wildey. And he was a little dismayed at some of the choices by Hanna-Barbera because they, you know, they got up against it time-wise. That quality of animation takes a lot of time. And they had to get a lot of their other dudes in on it that were used to drawing the funny animals. So in some of the episodes, you had like, it looks like something out of a Yogi Bear cartoon, but it's a great, I think it's the best cartoon in the history of cartoons myself. Here's another great one, Well, they call it on this King Kong the Animated Series. The official name of it is just The King Kong Show by Rankin Bass with animation by a Japanese company called Toei. And it's, I loved this when I was a kid. I remember watching it in 1966. Now, sadly, they don't offer, or they didn't when the last time I looked, a DVD set of the complete series. I don't know if most of those are lost or what, but they have this 2-volume, this partial set here that features 8 different episodes and the pilot in 2 different. It's cut up into 2 different shows. The first half of the pilot is on volume 1, and the second half is on volume 2. And I got some toys back there that tie in with that show. So if you get a chance, watch the King Kong show if you haven't seen it. And if you've ever seen the show, the theme song will stick in your head. King Kong, you know the name of King Kong, you know the fame of King Kong, 10 times as big as a man. It's one of those earwigs that just won't leave, but it's cool. Here's Land of the Lost. This is a live-action series from Sid and Marty Krofft, who did a lot of live-action series back in the day. And this is from the 70s. It's got, this is a complete series. So, they had some pretty cool storylines with this. It was a little campy, but, and the animation wasn't Ray Harryhausen by any means, but hey, it's Saturday morning cartoons. What do you expect? They did a good job for what they had to work with. So if you get a chance, watch Land of the Lost. Now I've got this just as representative. This is Looney Tunes, the Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck stuff, because I used to watch the Bugs Bunny show back, in the '60s. They'd run it real early when I used to watch it in the mid-'60s, before the other stuff came on, like the primetime stuff. But they have made so many DVD versions of these Looney Tunes cartoons. And, for the most part, it's just stuff that was shown in the theater. But they tie it together with, like a show opening and stuff, so that it became a Saturday morning cartoon as well. And, you can't deny that Bugs Bunny and the Looney Tunes stuff is some of the greatest cartoons in history. And the problem with the DVD volumes, they repeat certain episodes in different volumes. So I was having trouble trying to figure out how to get a full collection of it. And finally, I just kind of gave up. But I've got this one here as a representative for the show. Boy, this video. I'm going to have to step it up a little bit here. Now, I've got all these listed under Marvel. These are the Marvel series from 1966. These have animation by a company called Grant Ray Lawrence. And it's very limited animation, and they took the drawings from the comic books. So what's great about this, even though the animation itself for animation is not considered good by any means, but the source material is what you get to see. You get to see a lot of Jack Kirby, man. And we grew up with Jack Kirby. Here's Thor, Submariner, Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Captain America, and these all had some pretty catchy little theme songs too as the intro. So there again, I don't think this is offered as a factory DVD. You just have to kind of pick and choose and settle for bootleg on some of this stuff. But if you grew up with this stuff, you got to have it, man. Now here's the Milton the Monster show. This is a funny one and brings back a lot of great memories. And they, played into the monster craze. I believe this is 67. And the backup stories, Fearless Fly and Fluky Luke and a couple of the others, they're not really that great, to tell you the truth, but the Milton the Monster episodes are really great. You got Hebe and Jeeby, the backup characters, the monsters that are part of the family, Professor Weirdo, Count Kook, and this is Hebe, and this is GB. And you know, if you get a chance, grab that because it's good stuff. If you grew up with it, you love it. This is another Hanna-Barbera superhero cartoon that I'm really crazy about. This is Moby Dick and the Mighty Mightor. Now the Moby Dick episodes are pretty good, but the show here is Mighty Mightor. I mean, if you're a dino kid, you're going to love this because it's just full of crazy over-the-top dinosaurs that are really monsters. And this Mightor is like a caveman version of Mighty Thor. Only instead of an enchanted hammer, he's got an enchanted club. And this little character here is named Little Rock, and he's hilarious. He's always getting into trouble, and he tries to, you know, he has hero worship for Mighty Mightor, and he tries to emulate him. And he's always dragging this vulture in on his misadventures and getting him in trouble. His name is Orc. And that Little Rock is always demanding that Orc fly into danger, you know, so that he can play Mighty Mightor in the middle of some catastrophe. And there's some shots of it from the back there. So yeah, you know, if you want to read any of that, you can just pause the video after it finally focuses for us. Here's the Perils of Penelope Pitstop. This is actually a pretty good show. You know, it's another spin-off from Wacky Races. And this is the whole series. It's not bad. Okay, now here is a newer cartoon. This is Pirates of Dark Water. And it's by Hanna-Barbera. And the animation is really good on this. It has some interesting backgrounds. And it's an interesting, the setting of it is pretty cool. And, you know, I really liked it. It came out in the 80s. And take a look at the back of it here. And you can read that and see if it's something you might like. It's a fantasy oriented setting. It's pretty cool. Now here is a set that came out a few years ago. This is like a sampling of various Saturday morning cartoons from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And you know, it's got a little bit of Filmation's Batman, some Porky Pig, and the Flintstone Kids, Thundar. I mean, it's just a little bit of everything. It's got a lot of great stuff from the 60s. It's got like 2 volumes of stuff from the 60s. So you get a good overview of what it was like to be a kid watching cartoons in the 60s in this one set. And this is fun just to put on a disc at a time and let them roll, you know. Just hit play all and go back in time. This is Schoolhouse Rock. Now in the 70s, I think this was first in the early 70s. Anyway, they came out with this series. It's like these are public service cartoons. They were ran like commercials, and basically they are meant to teach. And they have some catchy little songs, you know. And they're short little things. This is all of them in this one set, 30th anniversary edition. So, you know, if you grew up watching those Schoolhouse Rock little cartoons, you'll enjoy that. And this is Shazam. This is another one of the Hanna-Barbera superhero cartoons from the 60s. I think 67 is when this debuted. And, you know, you've got these 2 kids that fly around on this winged camel named Kabubi. And here's the back. Now, the one thing that wasn't as good with Shazam as I thought it could have been, I think he was like too powerful. He just could do anything, and it was all magic. So he would just make the villains that also used magic look terrible by comparison. It's like they just did not have a chance against Shazam. He was overpowered, but it was still fun, you know, for what it was. It was still fun. I think it was the lesser of the Hanna-Barbera superhero cartoons, just simply because he was overpowered. Now this is a good one from the 90s, The Silver Surfer. They never finished this. This is all the ones that they put out, 13 episodes. But they were just building up to a huge fight between the Silver Surfer and Thanos. And the series just ended. And, you know, it's got really great animation. I mean, they use computer graphics to great extent in this. Usually I'm not a big fan of CGI, but when they intermeshed that with the animation, they did a pretty good job. Now here's the classic. This is Space Ghost and Dino Boy. Anybody that grew up with this was probably moved by it. And of course you had Space Ghost Coast to Coast later on the Cartoon Network. And I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, some of it's pretty good, and I don't know. I like the real thing. Even though it was kind of corny for an adult to admit to, and still, give me the real thing, man. And Dino Boy, that was good, you know, because I was a Dino kid, so I love that. Space Ghost is one of the greatest cartoons ever, the real one. Now, this is Space Cadets and Young Samson. Young Samson was another one of those Hanna-Barbera superheroes that hit the airwaves in '67. And all those were really popular. The problem was they had some violence, and I think that was about the time that some of the parents groups started getting up in arms about some of the violence, and that gradually shook down to where you know, we ended up with stuff like the Smurfs and around 1980, around that or whatever. Anyway, here's Space Stars. I believe this came out around 1980. This features a lot of the Hanna-Barbera characters from the 60s that teamed up and crossed over in stories. And this is actually pretty good. You know, if you grew up with these characters in the 60s, now they made up some new ones too. This Teen Force and this Uglor character that is like the big overall villain. But you know, you had Space Ghost teaming up with the Herculoids and the Teen Force, and they had the Space Mutts, Astro and the Space Mutts, for comedy relief. But this is actually pretty fun, and of course, this was as a result of the popularity of Star Wars that brought on all the space stuff. Everything went space, man. But Space Stars is good, and it's worth watching. Here's you know, a real classic, this Spider-Man cartoon that premiered in 1967. I think this is out of print now. I don't know if it went back in print or what, but last I checked, it was a little bit pricey. I bought it back when it was new, so anyway, this is one of the classics, one of the ones you ought to watch. I was a little confused as a kid for years because I did not know why Spider-Man changed so. The look of it, you know, the ambiance of it, the backgrounds, the feel of it changed all of a sudden. And I found out later it was because it was taken over by Ralph Bakshi not long after the series started. And he, you know, went on these fantastic underground adventures, and you know, you had the Bakshi elves and weird fantasy elements combined with Spider-Man. So I don't know, it's different. You can check it out, but it's pretty good overall. The first few episodes were when he was doing real Spider-Man stuff in New York, so they're actually a little cooler, I think. Here is Tennessee Tuxedo and His Tales. That's another one of the classic ones, and that is by Total Television. Not the same people that did Bullwinkle, but the same animation crew. An outfit in Mexico. did the animation. Gamma, I think, is the name of their company. But you know, it's good, man. I mean, the problem with this release, they don't have them grouped as they showed as they originally showed. They have all the Tennessee Tuxedo episodes together and all of the backup features together, and it's not quite as good as if it was grouped, you know, the way they were originally shown. Here's another great one. You know, this has got Jack Kirby all over it. This is Thundar the Barbarian. It came out, I think, in 1980 or around that. And of course, you know, you got Thundar and Ukla and Ariel, Demon Dogs, Ride, and all that. And, you know, I loved it, man, and I still do. I still watch these things. I still really enjoy watching these. And I think, according to Jack Kirby, it was made as like you know, just an homage to some past stuff, you know, that was popular. The Sun Sword is like his version of lightsabers from Star Wars, and of course, Thundar is a take on Conan the Barbarian, albeit, you know, almost superhuman strength and leaping ability. In the case of Thundar, I mean, these guys can jump off of a cliff and land on horseback, and it does not hurt them or the horses. So that's got to be like a special power. But this is really good stuff. And if you get a chance and you like the fantasy genre or the sci-fi genre or the post-apocalyptic genre, just check them out. And boy, I'm desperately trying to get that to focus. This camera, man, I tell you. Okay, well, I'm tapping out on that. All right. Anyway, watch Thundar. It's good. Underdog, another classic. Really funny, really cool, great backup features, you know, and see if that one's going to focus for us. Yeah, it likes Underdog. Didn't like Thundar for some reason. But anyway, you know, the Go-Go Gophers and Commander McBragg are just classic stuff, especially the Go-Go Gophers. You know, the Underdog stuff is great, but watch it for Go-Go Gophers if nothing else. And this is a complete series here for that. And then we're getting toward the end here, then I'll get to that stuff real quick. This is Valley of the Dinosaurs. Now, this is like a kinder gentler version of Dino Boy. It follows a family trying to survive, you know. They fell into prehistoric past, and they're trying to get by there, and they try to cooperate with the indigenous people, and not a bad show. This was after they started cracking down on some of the violence, and you can really tell the difference. I mean, it's like a Brady Bunch version almost in a way. Still worth watching though, especially if you saw it new. I think certain color combinations of letters and backgrounds have more of a problem focusing. Okay, this is the last DVD we're going to look at, and I love Scooby-Doo. I just don't have the DVDs for Scooby-Doo, if anybody's wondering about that. This is the Wacky Races. This is another classic, Dick Dastardly and Muttley. And of course, you know, Penelope Pitstop, Professor Pat Pending, all those racers. And every episode was a big cross-country race, you know, and these guys were always trying to get through the obstacles that Dick Dastardly came up with, and they'd always backfire on them. But it's a great, funny show, so, you know, can't say enough good things about Wacky Races. Okay, let's look at the toys. First of all, I've got this Marx Iron Man figure out because it came out in '67. I had all 6 of these, and I foolishly sold them years ago. I still have the Iron Man though. This was a duplicate, and he's in the appropriate color of red. These came in different colors. Some of them orange, some green, but Iron Man needs to be red. And that's a pretty cool cover by Marks. I don't know if, anyway, it came out in 67. And we've got the MPC King Kong toys. This is the jungle set. This is the big play set. And here's the original box for that. I've got the whole set, and I did a video on these King Kong MPC play sets that I will put a link in the description if you guys want to check that out. And that's the box for the jungle set, and here is the King Kong figure. You can move his arms and his head, and he's got a magnet in his hand. That's the gimmick. And these character figures from the show. Here's Bobby Bond. These little figures are actually rubber. And they've got a piece of metal attached to the back so that Kong can lift them up. That's Bobby Bond. Here is his sister, Susan Bond. And here is the father, Professor Bond. And here is Captain Inglehorn with his pipe. Okay, now this is the boxed version of the playset. This is extremely hard to get. It's probably legitimately rare. There's all four of the character figures. That has as perfect as you're going to get a King Kong figure in it. It was never played with. And there's the Skull Island insert and a tank and 6 of the NPC soldiers. And it's kind of set on Skull Island, but they were going for, you know, like when Kong goes to New York and encounters the military. And there's the end of the box. And here is the top of the box. Great graphics. MPC excelled with their graphics, especially on monster toys. And you know, this box has some wear and some minor condition issues, but considering that any of these in any condition is so hard to get, it's kind of a big deal just to have it. I don't know what it, you know, fair market value would be on it. I've only ever seen one other, and the box was crushed and the cello was torn out. You know, the cellophane, the window was torn out of it, and I don't think it was complete either. But I mean, you can get the original pieces to complete it, but just having the box intact is the big deal. Now let's look at some of the comic books. Okay, this is America's Best TV Comics. This was made by Marvel for ABC. Came out in 1967 as a promotion really for their cartoons. It lists them all on the front there. You know, Spider-Man, Casper the FF, King Kong Show, George of the Jungle, Journey to the Center of the Earth. I loved these in 67. I was 8 years old. I really enjoyed this stuff. And of course, you know, this, you can tell some of the illos like that Mr. Fantastic and the FF there, that's Kirby. Really stands out. This is my off the rack copy of this. I bought this new off the spinner rack back in 67. And this is put out by Marvel. This is TV Stars number 3, and it has a Herculoids story in there and also Space Ghost. That's 70s, I believe. Now we got some gold key here. Fun In. This is number 2. That stars Dastardly and Muttley, and there's Penelope Pitstop. There's another one of their funny animal characters. It's the wolf. And here is another issue of Fun In. It's number 5, Motor Mouse and Autocat. And of course we got Dastardly and Muttley there too. They were really popular. The Wacky Races was a popular cartoon. Now we're getting into some superhero stuff. This is number 1 of Hanna-Barbera Super TV Heroes. And, you know, it's got the main people in it. It's got Herculoids, Birdman, Moby Dick, Mighty Minotaur, Young Samson, and Goliath. And it's even got Galaxy Trio in there. These things have gotten a little pricey. This is number 2. Shazam, Galaxy Trio, Birdman, Herculoids, Moby Dick, and Mighty Minotaur. Yeah, they had a lot of, you know, continuation of main characters issue after issue of this. It only ran 7 issues. This is number 3. Now, that is a label that's holding the flat down. I've got these double bagged in Mylar. You know, they're not in high grade, but still, I want to protect what they are because they're pretty cool, you know, and they do have some value even in low grade. And this is number 4. There's a good shot of the Herculoids there. And Birdman, Shazam, and Moby Dick. It's number 5. It's more Shazam, Birdman, Moby Dick, Mighty Minotaur. Wonderful stuff, you know, if you grew up watching this stuff. It's all pretty special to you. Here is number 6. There's Minotaur, Moby Dick, Herculoids, Space Ghost. I normally change the lighting when I show comics or magazines, but since there are so few comics, I'm just going with the regular lighting that I use with the toys and stuff. So we got some glare, but you know, we can persevere. There's the last issue, number 7. This features Herculoids and Space Ghost, as well as some of the others, Moby Dick, Mighty Minotaur. And here is one that I'm glad I got because these things are getting really expensive. Space Ghost, the one-shot from Gold Key. This, in the indicia, this is Mark 67, but this hit the stands in December of 1966. Now, at the top here, we see some writing in pen that somebody tried to erase unsuccessfully, but it says 6/12/20. So evidently, this was put on the spinner rack December 20th of 1966. And it's a pretty nice copy. I mean, you see a lot of beaters of this book on eBay that sell for, you know, $100 or more. I mean, chunks missing, detached covers, the works, but I'm glad to get a decent copy of it. All right, well, that was our trip in the Wayback Machine for Saturday morning cartoons. I hope you liked it, and stay tuned because we're going to be doing a lot more monstering and dinoing and having a lot of fun on this channel. So I'll see you guys later.